Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this important discussion on supporting diversity in companies during these uncertain times. For those of you who may need to, you can turn on the captions using the menu at the bottom of this screen. You are also welcome to add your questions to the Q&A window at any point in today's discussion because we will be leaving 15 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A. Also, feel free to use those reactions at the bottom of the screen if you hear something you like or to show support to our speakers. I am your moderator, Deanna Andrews, founder of District Consulting, a marketing strategy consultancy, as well as a former ERG leader who understands why fostering an inclusive workplace should remain not just a priority, but a necessity. We have a full agenda including the current state of ERGs and ensuring you have foundations for success, as well as high impact ERG engagement strategies. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from two exceptional leaders who are at the forefront of driving meaningful change. Our first panelist is Kim B. Holmes, who exemplifies leadership in building inclusive organizations through her extensive experience guiding global teams in technology and human resources. She uses her degrees in humanities and nonprofit administration in her Chicago based initiatives, as well as increasing the representation of women in color in tech. Joining her is Tamika Green, an award winning workforce and employee engagement expert with over 15 years' experience creating lasting positive change for organizations in all types of business sectors. I had the opportunity to benefit directly from her DEI expertise during my time as chair of a women's ERG in tech. Her team developed support materials and trainings that equipped us as ERG leaders to effectively support our members and drive meaningful impact. Their strong commitment to fostering inclusive spaces is what inspired the creation of this ERG Survival Guide webinar. I know that we will gain valuable insights from their perspective on how ERG leaders can help create a culture of belonging in today's evolving environment. Please join me in welcoming Tamika Green and Kim B. Holmes to the conversation. And now I will turn it over to Kim to get us started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for investing a bit of your time with us this afternoon. We want to make sure you get a return on your investment, so we're going to be covering some of the following things. We know that ERGs remain a critical pillar in helping to increase employee engagement, career development, and business impact. During our time today, Tamika and I are going to provide context and clarity on the fundamentals of how to drive engagement in your ERG and some specific ideas on how to do that. First, it's important that we level set on the current state of ERGs. As we mentioned in our last webinar, there's a lot that's going on in the news, and we want to make sure that we keep you grounded on why ERGs are as important now as they ever were. Let's look at some facts. ERGs by the numbers. According to Paycor, a payroll processing company, for most companies, labor costs, including wages, benefits, payroll taxes, are the largest expense a company will see, accounting for 50 to 70% of total business costs. A recent Harvard Business Review study shared that disengaged employees cost between $450 and $500 billion annually due to lost productivity. However, organizations with highly engaged employees experience 21% greater profitability, 20% higher sales. An employee resource group with engaged members can remain a time-tested approach to improve a company's employee experience and drive long-term business results. 90% of Fortune 500 companies have ERGs. 65% of employees who participate in ERGs say that these groups positively impact their careers. Companies with employee resource groups experience 18% higher employee productivity than those that don't have them. And 52% of seasoned professionals have said that ERG positively impacted their decision to apply for a role. Now, let's get down to the meat of what is causing some of the turbulence in the environment and some of the talk about ERGs. Recent conversations and concerns about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, including employee resource groups, center around the notion that these programs might potentially violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a landmark piece of legislation that sought to level the playing field in employment by prohibiting workplace discrimination. The most recent turning point involves two technical assistance documents issued by the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, along with the Department of Justice, attempting to clarify what might constitute DEI-related discrimination at work and providing guidance on how workers can file such complaints over these concerns. These documents take broad aim at practices such as training, employee resource groups, and fellowship programs, warning that such programs, depending on how they're constructed and led, could run afoul of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employee discrimination based on race or gender. As we start to understand potential impacts to our ERGs and to make sense of whether or not our ERG could possibly be looked upon badly, I encourage you to do a one-question audit of your ERG. Does your ERG program discriminate based on religion, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity? I encourage us all to take a look at the advice given by Affirmity, a noted workplace compliance and diversity consultancy, which says that you should review your mission statement of each of your ERGs and how it ties back to business need while ensuring that there are no exclusionary practices. In addition to this simple review of what your ERG stands for and the Affirmity advice, I encourage you, if in doubt, to always work with your organization's legal counsel to be on the safe side. So, in looking at this guidance from Affirmity and looking at what the Department of Justice has said about employee resource groups, it encourages us to go back to basics, to help your ERG withstand any concerns and to set the stage of it for engagement. Audit your foundational materials to ensure that your organization is rooted in inclusion and make sure that your members and potential members know what exactly they can expect from the investment in your ERG. These foundational materials are your branding, your platform, and should help all stakeholders begin to understand why they should partner with you. Would love to see a thumbs up if your ERG mission and vision statements, if you have them, and if they clearly outline who you are and the value you work to deliver. As we look at charters, let's talk about the specifics that should be included in some of these foundational materials. Your ERG name. Is it clear and centers the identity that you want to represent in your community? Does it reflect the company culture? You're encouraged to avoid bureaucratic terms and to use inclusive intersectional language, welcoming everyone, making room for allies. And I also encourage you to check your acronyms. Your mission statement. It should describe the purpose of your ERG and what you hope to achieve, keeping it value aligned and inclusive. Hand in hand with your mission statement is your vision statement. It should be aspirational and describe the future that you are working towards. How will your organization be different because your ERG exists? And lastly, goals and objectives. Remembering the 4C model that we spoke about in our last webinar, use those when developing goals aligned with those of your company, focusing on culture, community, career, and commerce. Would love to now turn it over now to Tamika to talk about key challenges that we may be facing when looking at ERG engagement. Tamika?
Thanks, Kim. In addition to the challenges that ERGs are facing due to the external factors that Kim mentioned, now let's talk about some of the most common and pressing challenges that ERG leaders are facing today when it comes to sustaining engagement. Now, one of the first challenges that many ERG leaders and members face are competing priorities. Leaders and members are already stretched very thin. Most of us leading ERGs are on top of our day jobs, right? Without any additional compensation or dedicated time. Now, this can lead to burnout, not only for ERG leaders, but also for members who really want to contribute, but just don't have the bandwidth to do so. To sustain engagement, we must recognize that there are human limits and really be intentional about creating space for rest, delegation, and shared leadership. Another challenge that faces ERG engagement is when there's leadership turnover or loss of sponsorship. Now, when an executive sponsor or a leader leaves the organization or shifts roles, sometimes ERGs can lose momentum, and that also can affect credibility at times. So that loss of visibility and support can feel like you're starting over. Now, it's important to have multiple champions across different levels of the organization and make sure that you're documenting your ERG goals, your impact, and keeping your vision top of mind so that way when leadership transitions happen, they don't derail your progress. Influence mapping, which we discussed in our last session, is really a great tool to help you identify who your key stakeholders are and who can help champion your ERG's initiatives. Another challenge is shifting commitments. As Kim discussed a few minutes ago and in our last live conversation, in the current climate, we're seeing a shift in how some organizations are approaching D&I, and that affects ERGs directly. Some companies are scaling back or reframing their commitments, which can create confusion and fear among ERG leaders and members. And in these moments, it's really critical to refocus on your ERG's core mission, vision, and values while finding ways to align with your business. And finally, limited resources and time. ERG leaders often have great ideas, but not enough resources to bring them to life, whether it's budget or headcount or access to tools. And even if budget exists, getting approvals can sometimes be a barrier. Now, this can lead to disengagement and really be discouraging at times. So it's really important to get creative and use your internal partnerships like teaming up with HR, learning and development, or other ERGs to pool your resources. Now listen, challenges are real, but you're not facing them by yourself. What's important is how you adapt as an ERG when these challenges arise. And the good news is that we'll be sharing a lot more strategies and tools with you throughout the afternoon, many that we'll talk about that will help keep your ERG strong, impactful, even in times of uncertainty. Now let's talk about a few strategies to address engagement challenges. One of them is just simplifying your programming. One of the most effective ways to prevent burnout for both leaders and members is to reduce the pressure to constantly do more. Instead, focus on high quality, high impact programming that aligns with your mission and the needs of your members. Ask yourself, does this initiative deepen connection? Does it support development and visibility? Now, does it align with our organization's priorities? Because even one powerful event every quarter can have more lasting impact than a packed and overwhelming calendar. Secondly, re-engage your sponsors. If you've noticed that your executive sponsors' engagement has dipped, it might be time to reconnect with them and remind them of the value that your ERG brings to the organization. One strategy is to create short, data-backed impact reports or a success story from an employee about receiving a promotion. It makes a really big difference. Invite them to participate or become a part of your next event. It's really a great way to reignite their involvement and visibility. Don't be afraid to advocate for your ERG. If you have needs, whether it's funding or time allocation or logistical support, make sure to make your case that your ERG needs sustainable resources in order to execute on their goals and objectives. Also, be very clear about setting expectations on what your leadership is doing, so that way no one feels like they're taking everything on themselves. Make sure you're sharing leadership, rotate your projects, and co-chair structures of ERGs also help to prevent burnout, share resources, and keep things running smoothly. And finally, I think we've mentioned this ad nauseum, but I'll mention it again, to make sure that you're connecting and aligning your ERG work with your business goals and objectives. When you can make that connection between your work and what your organization is already prioritizing, you reinforce the value of your ERG. This kind of alignment not only gets you support, but it also protects your ERG from becoming deprioritized when organizational focus shifts. Now, these strategies aren't about doing more, they're about doing what matters the most. Simplifying, realigning, and advocating for what your ERG really needs are all powerful tools for long-term impact. And remember, small, consistent efforts often lead to big results over time. Now let's talk about community building and engagement. Before we dip into some skills and tools, let's talk about why engagement really is important now. Retention and loyalty equals engagement. Research shows that the more employees are engaged and feel connected to purpose, they're more likely to stay with an organization, perform at higher levels, and speak positively about their employer. Now, when people are active in an ERG, they're more likely to form bonds that keep them at the company. And when they're invested in community, that brings that same energy back to the work. Participation and energy creates momentum. Now, when people are actively engaged, when they speak up, when they volunteer, when they contribute ideas, they generate positive vibes and energy that fuel the entire group. And that energy is contagious and goes around and around within your group and within your organization. When you have one member that steps up to lead a project, it can spark 5 others to do the same. But remember, it's not about attendance, it's about contribution. Every bit of participation builds momentum, it strengthens the roots of your culture, and it moves your ERG forward. And finally, connection and meaning. Employees are craving connection now more than ever before. Now, whether you're working remotely or in a hybrid model or navigating return to office transitions, the sense of connection that once came naturally now takes intention. ERGs are one of the few spaces in a company where people can show up as their full selves, build relationships, and feel seen. Now, in times of uncertainty, that kind of connection isn't just a nice to have, it's essential for well-being and morale. Now, when we talk about building community in ERGs, what does that really mean? Now, community building isn't just hosting a bunch of events and activities. It's about being intentional and creating an intentional space where members can feel connected, valued, and seen. It means fostering shared identity, trust, and purpose with each other. A strong community supports one another during challenges and celebrates one's growth. And it's always about belonging, not just being invited, but feeling like you truly matter to each other and to the organization. Now let's talk about the 2 different types of events the ERGs facilitate in organizations. They're centered in participation and centered in engagement. Now, it's very important to understand that there is a difference between the two types of events. Now, participation meetings or events are very surface level. Your members are just basically showing up. But engagement events, on the other hand, are much deeper. It's when your members feel like they're emotionally invested, when they volunteer, when they share ideas, and when they advocate for each other. Now, the goal should be for ERG leaders to shift from transactional participation to meaningful engagement, because that's where loyalty, growth, and impact really lie. Now, here's just a few examples of participation-centered events and engagement events. Now, the most common types of events that ERGs facilitate are participation-centered events. Now, these events are great. They build awareness, they build engagement, but they are passive types of engagement. Engagement-centered events like listening circles or skill-building workshops, Kim will talk more about later in the conversation, really create opportunities for members to actively engage with each other and participate together in ways that, again, build community, collaboration, trust, and support. Here's some other high-impact community building tactics that work really well. How about setting up welcome programs? Something as simple as a personalized message or an intro call can make a huge difference to new employees in your organization. Storytelling campaigns are also important, where people are telling their why. Why are they parts of an ERG? It helps to build empathy and connection with each other. Casual coffee chats or virtual meetups are also great ways to keep the group more human-centered. And also, don't forget to celebrate and recognize the contributions that your members bring. Celebrating milestones and efforts keep members motivated and appreciated. Now, Kim mentioned earlier about the importance of intersectionality. So when you're thinking of building community, think about building community across multiple identities. Community being uniform, it means inclusive connection. So to build truly inclusive ERGs, you have to think about intersectionality. Collaborate with other ERGs in your organizations to host events. Spotlight different voices and honor those layered identities, because diversity within an ERG should be reflected in your programming. Here's some examples of what intersectional programming looks like in action. So if you have a parenting employee resource group, maybe it's a great opportunity to talk about diverse ways of parenting, or talk about the intersections of caregiving and your children's identity. Across ERG, Heritage Month is a great way to celebrate multiple identities. Maybe during June, during Pride Month, you could have your Black ERG and your LGBTQ+ ERG talk about pioneers within the communities or co-host events together. But whatever type of intersectional programming you decide to do, you should always ask yourself as ERG leaders 2 questions. Who's missing in the conversation? And are we creating space for those layered identities? And finally, another great way to build community is through rituals, because rituals are powerful. They create rhythm, familiarity, and a sense of community. Whether it's a monthly check-in or a yearly signature event, celebrating culturally significant moments, these rituals form emotional anchors for your members. So think of them as kind of a cultural guide, if you will, that reinforces belonging and identity. Rituals also give members something to look forward to, especially in those uncertain times. So now that we've laid the groundwork of what the current state of ERGs are, the challenges that lend itself to ERG engagement, ways to build community engagement, I'll turn it back over to my friend Kim to talk about strategies on how to build high impact ERG engagement. Take it away, Kim. You're on mute. You're on mute. Kim, I'm sorry, you're on mute, my friend.
It's been 5 years. You would think we'd know by now,
It's
but
all good.
but we go on. So Tamika gave us some great examples of what we need to do, some things we need to consider. So let's continue on that theme and start getting specific about ways to drive engagement. As you look to enhance ERG engagement, there's some things that should be implemented to attract, retain, and engage your members. Several of these that I'll cite are important for the development of the ERG leaders themselves, not just the communities they lead, because we want to make sure that those leaders are fed and sustained while serving in those roles to lead the organization. Let's start with time. Tamika shared that time can be a source of burnout. So one way to combat that is to create dedicated ERG time. Put together a calendar for the ERG. We're going to meet at this time on a consistent basis. That allows your members, whether it's committee of the whole, ERG leaders, other committees that you might have, to be able to plan their schedules as best possible to meet the needs of the ERG and allow them to be engaged. Funding. And while in our last seminar, we talked about the need to fund the ERGs, I want to take this a step further and suggest we need to fund specific professional development activities for ERG leaders, some of whom don't have a leadership role in their day jobs and could use additional guidance, counseling, and learning opportunities to develop their leadership skills. Recognition. Tamika really laid out some outstanding ideas for how to include ERG participation in performance reviews so that those who don't see your work will know of your work and your ability to speak to it and how you develop new skills and bring new impact to the business because of your ERG involvement. A recent survey showed that only 24% of organizations currently include ERG leadership in their performance reviews. Good news is that an additional 47% said they would like to begin doing so. I'd say no time like the present to hop on that trend and starting to get some value for the investments that you're making in your ERG. It should go without saying that ERG infrastructure is critically important to running this business initiative. Access to tools for managing projects, specific communication channels for the ERG, branding support from corporate marketing can help, as well as budget. When you have these tools in place, they allow your ERG leaders to be able to plan and execute on the activities of the ERG in a way that permit engagement. Having these tools in place ensure that they don't have to consume the bandwidth they have to create these platforms. Leveraging existing infrastructure and platforms can go a long way to providing that additional tailwind that ERG engagements might need. I said it before, and I will stand on this. Food is a great way to engage people. It might be that participation level of engagement where it's passive, they come and take part, but then on the other side of that, you have the opportunity to really bring them in with the programming that you offer. And then communication supports. You want to be able to speak to your members and have them be able to speak to you. A number of different forms and a number of different types of content for you to share so that individuals have that steady flow of information that allows them to feel that they are part of something important. To that end, let's dig a little bit deeper on communication that builds engagement. How we communicate in our ERGs really matters. It's built not just through programming, as Tamika mentioned, but also through the tone, the frequency, and the inclusivity of your communication. You're encouraged to use whatever channels you have available, but use multiple channels because we know everyone consumes information differently. Whether it's Slack or Teams, email, newsletters, but always with a human voice. Highlighting those member stories, a post about update on your goals that you've set, because I know you set goals, we said we would. And then most importantly, the ability to create that two-way communication with feedback loops through polls, open forums, or a simple, how are you doing? Those messages go a long way in showing members that they're not just being talked at, but they're part of something special. As we talk about engagement and how to ensure that everyone knows why they are there and the impact they're having, one of the most overlooked ways is steps to be taken to measure your impact. It's not enough just to say that your event went well or that people are engaged. To sustain support and demonstrate value to leadership and your ERG, we need to track metrics that matter. If your ERG doesn't have its own metrics tracking system, one system you can use is the 4C model, which we've discussed before. Here's a quick reminder. We'll do a quick reminder of what that 4C model looks like. Remember, we're talking about culture, career, communication, community, and commerce. As we go about talking about these metrics that matter, we want to go beyond attendance, as was noted earlier. It's a starting point and it's important, but it's not the full story. A virtual packed room doesn't always equal high-level engagement. Instead, think about asking things like, who's attending? Are you returning? Are we seeing participation from different levels, different functions, different identities? Patterns in attendance can help you start to identify the topics that resonate most, who you're reaching, and where there might be some gaps in inclusion. Who's missing from the table? A second thing we want to think about when tracking metrics that matter is tracking engagement, not just activity. Think about metrics that show how people are interacting, not just showing up. Some examples could include participation in breakout rooms or in discussion segments of your meetings or activities. The number of volunteers and committee leads that start stepping up. Those are the things that ERG leaders really can tell, because that means they're not carrying the weight by themselves. Contributions from surveys or feedback forms that you do, and the uptick in mentorship programs or internal collaboration. These are signs that people are starting to feel a sense of ownership and not just an obligation. A third way to look at metrics is look at membership and growth of your ERG. Keep an eye out on how many folks are joining, staying involved, and stepping up into leadership roles. A healthy ERG shows steady or growing membership with visible pathways for members to grow into leadership. If you're seeing drop off, that's incredible feedback. It's a gift. Members may need more targeted engagement or to further understand opportunities to connect. A fourth thing to look at is impact on business goals. This is where ERGs really have that opportunity to shine, where you can connect your efforts to business outcomes. Some examples of this include an ERG mentoring program contributing to increased promotion rates, feedback from listening sessions influencing policy updates, perhaps cross-ERG collaboration that informs product or service innovation, improved engagement or retention scores among ERG members and non-members. These metrics speak the organization's language and show that the ERG is more than community, it's a strategic asset. Looking at measuring these metrics in this way also gives your ERG a chance to partner with thought leaders around the organization who are the organizational keepers of some of these statistics. You want to know who they are, what they're invested in, so you can help show how your contributions are helping them achieve their goals. In addition to these quantitative metrics, qualitative metrics play a significant role as well in your communication. Please don't underestimate the power of storytelling as data. A powerful member testimonial can be just as impactful as a spreadsheet. Capture feedback through anonymous surveys, testimonials, or informal check-ins. Then package those stories along with your numbers to paint a full picture of your ERG's impact. Remember, you don't have to track everything. Focus on a few key meaningful metrics that align with your ERG's goals, mission, and values. Over time, these data points become your strongest tools for securing ongoing support, demonstrating progress, and shaping your ERG's future strategy. When we talk about ERG impact, as we said, numbers tell part of the story, but pairing those numbers with human experiences are really what helps bring your ERG values to life. Story-based impact. Just to look at the slide here where you see some examples on being able to understand retention among ERG members as you are able to reach out to them and ask them what's going on, why they choose to stay, and how the ERG has been a part of that. A belonging score to understand how their ERG participation has colored that number. Imagine someone attending their first ERG event. Maybe it's a listening circle or a monthly heritage celebration. They hear stories that reflect their own. They feel seen. That single moment can shift their entire perception of whether they belong in the organization. This metric reflects that inclusion isn't just policy, it's personal. ERGs are a key driver in helping to help shape culture. And then looking at that engagement multiplier compared to non-ERG members. ERG members are over 3 times more likely to be engaged than their peers. That means they're more productive, more connected, and more likely to go above and beyond. Again, behind that stat is a story. Someone who got to lead an event or speak in a way they've never had to before. That kind of growth just doesn't benefit the individual, it strengthens the entire organization. That number shows how ERGs can fuel commitment, creativity, and contribution. When you present these numbers to leadership, pair them with stories from your members, real quotes, real moments of growth, personal wins. Because when you combine data with lived experience, you don't just report outcomes, you create connection, build credibility, and inspire continued investment. Some additional tips that we'll run through quickly here to be able to support ERG engagement. Hosting office hours. Perhaps there's a time where you just set up a Zoom call. You open up a bridge line and let people come and talk to ERG leaders about issues that are concerning to them. Your members, perhaps non-members who are curious and want to know more about what the ERGs are doing. We've spoke about mentoring, the ability to create buddies and help welcome new individuals in. And it doesn't have to be just new from the outside. Perhaps people have taken on a new role, they're in a new department, and they could use a little bit of guidance on how to navigate. Your ERG members can step in and help provide that connection. I love each one, bring one. If you are a member of an ERG, you're an ERG leader, and there are individuals who you'd like to see become more engaged, go get them, bring them into the event, help them feel settled. Spotlight opportunities around the organization. They could be part of your ERG. There could be job openings where the ERG hosts an event to highlight openings across the organization so that ERG members get that first peek at what could be available for them in that career pillar of the 4C model. When we talk about programming, things that work really well are skill building workshops. If you work in a large organization that has a learning and development department, here's a great chance to partner with them to find out, are there classes, are there learning opportunities that they might have on the shelf, that they were looking at doing, using the ERG as a channel to communicate about those and bring your members into those skill building opportunities. We've all benefited from lunch and learns. Give us a thumbs up if you've been to a lunch and learn or if you've led a lunch and learn. A great opportunity to have your members share in a quick, brief time when you know that people are most likely to be available. Activities that show a day in the life. Panel discussions, conversations with leaders in your organization that may have had similar career journeys to members of your community. They could be members of your organization's board of directors that you bring in to talk about their career journey, how they've gotten from where they started to where they've gotten to, what worked for them, what sage advice might they have to offer to your members. And then we all love a VIP experience. We all love something exclusive. And so the ability perhaps to host members only networking events where your members who you've gathered on an inclusive basis get together and just spend time with one another in community. Key takeaways right before we start moving into our question and answers is we all know that ERGs are navigating a new reality. We've also learned today, hopefully, that high impact engagement is intentional and inclusive. Strategic engagement is tied to business outcomes. And our engagement is about connection and not just attendance. We want you to walk away understanding that your ERG is a vehicle for belonging, voice, and visibility. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deanne to open us up for questions and answers. Deanne?
Thank you, Kim. Wow, thank you both for such great advice, tools to really help us maximize and measure the impact of ERGs. I could tell from some of the reactions as you were speaking that this really resonated with this group. So let's get into some of the questions. Our first question is from Shamika from Houston. How do we address members only opportunities or programs, offerings in the light of EOs? How do we avoid the exclusion perception?
First, I would say, have you is your membership open to everyone? So we have to start with the beginning, right? Is your ERG inclusive in its nature? If it is, then I think that you should have limited issues with having members only events because anyone who wanted to join would have the opportunity to do so.
Great. She says, yes, membership is open to everyone. Okay, let's get into some other questions here. This one is from Andrea. As an ERG leader, how do I manage member expectations when we're scaling back events due to limited capacity or burnout?
I'll take this. I would be honest and say, listen, due to, everything that's happening in the business and, decreased bandwidth, we really need to kind of scale back. Deanna, you can attest to this. At our previous organization, my colleague and I reset goals and objectives on a number of occasions based off of what was happening within the business and was very transparent with the ERG leaders. And actually, ERG leaders came to us and said, hey, can we kind of scale back a little bit because our KPIs, OKRs have become quite aggressive due to the business needs. So it is, it's a great opportunity for transparency, but it also shows that as a DNI leader or someone that is over ERGs, that you are mindful of what's happening within the business. And it's totally fine. And you should, flex as necessary in order to make sure that leaders are maintaining their work with their day jobs, but also that they have the capacity to continue serving as leader. Kim, do you have anything additionally to add?
I was going to say, I would add that this is a perfect opportunity to invite some of those members who are looking for more to step up, right? Rather than only looking to the designated leaders of the ERG to be responsible for feeding the community content and activities, here's a great way to invite other folks in. If there's something you'd like to do, let's talk about how we can establish a committee and you can lead that to see how we can bring that to life. Because, in our last webinar, we talked about the 10 rules of ERG leadership, and one of them is we is greater than me. This is the we bring in the we. Everybody gets a chance to help add things to the calendar to the extent that bandwidth and priorities allow. One way to create additional bandwidth is adding more people to the doer list.
Right.
I love that. That's great.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah. Our next question is from Joseph. In my organization, we are looking to build more safe spaces as our ERG serving both BIPOC and Pride both have more allies than members that identify. How would you recommend building safe spaces internally without being exclusive to those ally members? What a great question. Wow.
Well, I think it's important. It's a delicate dance, I will say. I know one of the ways that we've addressed this at the organization where Deanna and I worked at was really being very deliberate about how the event is communicated. So, for example, if there is a discussion that your ERG would like only in-group members to attend, then state that this is a event for in-group members, but all are welcome to, or basically talk about the topic will be focused on what's relevant to the in-group, but inviting everyone, because in the spirit of inclusion, you can't exclude anyone, but making it very obvious and intentional that the topic of the discussion will be centered in this community. And that has yielded itself to be a great way to be prescriptive without being exclusionary, which I don't think is a word, but you get what I'm saying. Exclusive. But it makes it very evident what the event or activity will be about. So that is what I've done in the past and previous experiences. Kim, I'm sure you might have some other examples to share.
Yeah, I think that you're right on in terms of making it clear what and who is being centered in this conversation, as well as outlining guidelines about how we're going to share airtime.
Correct, yes.
Right. So that the community that needs the safe space has the opportunity to take advantage of this opportunity, and that allies are encouraged to listen and learn.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Making sure that you make it clear that this is definitely for the in-group or those who identify. But yes, not making it exclusive. I love that. So our next question is from Marcia. We're noticing a drop in event participation. How do we know if it's a content issue, a scheduling problem, or something else?
Good question.
Can I start?
Yeah, please. Good.
I would say, have you asked them? Sometimes as leaders, it's really easy to get caught up in the what ifs and how comes and why nots, where we have the ability to ask individuals what brings value to them, and to be able to understand where we might be missing the mark in the moment.
Agreed. And also, to be honest, there are periods within the ERG life cycle where there are ebbs and flows in participation. So that is normal. It is normal to have where there are peaks and valleys in participation. But back to Kim's point, if you have a good pulse on what your members are wanting, whether it's employee surveys, post-event surveys, et cetera, based off of some of the stuff that Kim talked about earlier around measuring impact metrics that matter, is as long as you have a good pulse on what they're wanting, then it's normal to expect those ebbs and flows, but just making sure that it's not something that the group is doing deliberately to dissipate that participation. That's a good question.
Yeah, and we need to recognize that everything isn't for everybody. You
Correct.
may be hosting an event or serving up content or programming that doesn't interest me, but that shouldn't change what's happening for everybody else in the group. No one identity group is a monolith. and to recognize that they are all at different stages in their career, different stages of their life journey, or what's of interest to them. And so it's doing that longitudinal look at what's going on with engagement, attendance, participation is really what's important. Perhaps you hosted a couple of events that weren't well attended. Well, look at the makeup of your group. Were you providing content that might have been more entry level, where most of your group is mid to senior level? That might be your answer. So being able to have content that is universal is really hard when you've got people from all areas of an organization or for every level of the organization. So the ability to kind of rotate your content calendar so that you're hitting people based on where they are in their careers and what their interests are based on information you've gathered from them, will give you the best chance at having engagement, even though attendance may peak and valley from time to time.
That's great. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So this next one from Jelani. We've done a lot of engagement work, but how do we actually show senior leadership that is tied to business results?
Okay, Tamika, as a DEI leader, what are some of the things you've seen work?
Well, I think it's really important to keep what the business goals and objectives are top of mind. And ask yourself, when you're hosting an event or wanting to launch an initiatives, are they in alignment with our ERG mission, but also, more importantly, a little bit, are they in alignment with what our organization is wanting and is needing from a goal and business perspective? So for example, if you're working at a tech company like Deanna and I were, which was very AI centric at the time, and it was a brand new product for the organization, one of the shifts that we made was asking our ERG leaders, because a lot of them were involved in building this product, is how can we make sure that our programming going forward is helping to educate members and other colleagues about AI? Because this was a new concept for a lot of us in the organization. And so not only was it something that was cool to learn about, but it was something very relevant for our business. And because a lot of our ERG leaders were working on the product side, it just seemed like it was a great synergy to be able to align what our organization was focused on with what our ERGs were promoting from an event and content perspective. So if you're keeping abreast of what your organization is doing, listen to, although they're boring at times, listen to the earnings calls. You know, sometimes you may not know what's going on, but you can tell certain statements and afterwards check out what the news is saying or other programming, whether it be CNBC or other types of economic news stations are talking about after these earnings calls. Kind of get a gist of what, if your organization is publicly traded, have a decent handle on what your organization is doing. Go to those town halls. Again, boring at times, but if you listen to the CEO and CFO that are speaking at the town halls, you'll get an idea of what's happening in the business. And so, there are several ways to make sure that your events, activities, initiatives are aligned with what your organization is doing. But, making sure that you're keeping what they're focusing on top of mind really helps to guide and can help you tie to those business objectives and goals. Kim, anything to add?
I would say this is where you use your executive sponsor, because in most organizations, your executive sponsor is a vice president or above in the organization in larger companies, and they are at the table where initiatives are decided, budgets are funded. They understand they're running one or more business units. And so that person is your closest liaison to be in that room where it all happens, right? Having time, engaged time, where you're inviting your executive sponsor in to share what's on their mind, what are their individual business priorities, right? Your executive sponsor can not only inform you, but advocate for you and perhaps make space for you to participate in some of these things if you take the opportunity to truly get to know them, work with them, build trust with them, so they can take that trust forward with you to ensure that they're setting you up for success as you're defining what you're doing, how you're defining impact, and getting the resources you need to continue to thrive.
I love that. Absolutely ask your members and engage your executive sponsors. Make them work for the ERG. That's amazing. So with that, we're closing out the Q&A session. Thank you for everyone who submitted some questions. These are great for this discussion. I'll hand it back over to our two panelists to close out the session.
Well, thank you so much for leading us through that. If you're interested in getting some assistance from us, hold on one second. We're here to help. If you need some extra support, whether it's building out your ERG, designing impactful programming, or navigating change, we love to partner with you because helping leaders thrive is what we're here for. We'd also like to give a special thanks to our support village that helped us put this together today, our moderator, Deanna Andrews, tech support, Dwayne Andrews, music from Dylan Patty, and graphic design from Amy Weeby. Again, thank you for spending time with us today. We hope you're leaving with practical strategies, renewed energy, and a deeper sense of connection as you lead your ERGs forward. We'll be sending out a short survey after today's session. We'd love your feedback so we can keep improving and delivering value. And if you'd like to stay in touch with us, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we'll be sharing more resources, thought leadership, and upcoming events designed to support you and your ERG community. We can be found on YouTube at ERG Empowerment Initiative and on LinkedIn at ERG Empower Initiative as well. You can find us on our website as ergempowermentinitiative.com. Thank you for the work that you're doing because it truly matters, and we're honored to be in community. On behalf of Kim, Deanna, and Dwayne, we'd like to thank you for your time today, and we wish you well.